war and fauna, and specifically the munitionettes of both the Great World Wars, and they're about the munitionettes that were dubbed canaries because they were stained yellow from the chemicals they used to fill the shells. So this is called Canary Girls, Canary Girls. No machine had ever felt the plumage of a girl. No girl had ever flown inside the cabin of a crane and worked it. News broke swift, fields of houses emptied, whole factories beating deft with women's wings. Every flock had tools to ply. Some hammered, quick as beaks, others preened steel or weighed and measured, nursing bombs with a mother's eye. New girls hatched in night shifts, faces bright as yolk from packing shells with TNT. Feathers erupted, streaks of fire through skin. Some girls burned, blew away. Canary babies. Those months we laboured away were bitter, powder, TNT. We must have filled 1 million shells a week, yellowing, hair bleached. We sang through shifts to lift us. A doctor came who warned us not to work with mouths open. I caught my breath, tamped down thoughts of risk, then sang to my belly. Canary girls like us gave birth to birds. That was normal. Not wings that fluttered yellow, just babies, coloured by our work. Canary mother. You are kissing her hands, her tiny feet, her face, your blindness, your stumped arms, your lips untouched by the blaze. So I'd like to move from one type of really dingy and dangerous work to another. I wrote this poem after watching a BBC documentary on the closure of the last deep coal mine in Britain. It's called Kellingley Colliery. And I felt inspired, I suppose, once again by the poetry that was inherent in this manual labour. Pit. We plunge to a deep breath. My Delilah. Our lungs carry dust from the last coal cut. Chin up, the final whistles a fist. Fight back tears in the carriage. Headlights tunnel the dark. What's at the end of darkness? Silence as we lift. I'm speeding through these now. My husband began working in construction a few years back and I couldn't help myself from writing about it. And then the pandemic struck and I was pregnant. There was a lot of worry and a lot of new language that came with that. And the pandemic, ultimately altered the course of this poem. So it started as one thing and then the pandemic affected it. It's called This Man Comes In. He's tough, this man, a worker, early, shoulders the weight of a high-rise day, boots brick heavy, hands gloveless, calloused. Better to grip, he'd wink, rolling a smoke for a fix on the go as he waves in trucks, cranes, deliveries of rain to a roof where he weighs up the wind. For him, the clearest threat was glass. Fear was a pipe burst. Now there's a risk that's more than the building's worth, and when this man comes in, he's drilling what-ifs through his head. Numbers, equipment, boundaries unheeded by men, and we touch, but after he's showered. And after he's showered, and after I've massaged the hours from out his back or legs, I think about clapping and look to the clock, then realise, again, what we've missed. Quite a few times we missed the clap, and I really regretted that, but towards the end we remembered, and I missed it when it finished. So I want to lighten the tone and read a bit of silliness now, although I suppose it's still in keeping with class and relationships and the intersection between those. So coming from a very different perspective here, it's called Cashmere. And I have a prop. I bought a cashmere jumper. It's just a scrap, a handkerchief, a wisp of cashmere. Darling, you know I don't indulge. You should have seen me walking out with it draped over my arm. I must have looked quite smug. But this is what age and money affords you, darling. Independence, chicken, and cashmere. You can't even afford your own foot cream. I had to buy you that for your athlete's foot. This is what you're leaving, sweetie. And when that tube runs out, you'll come crawling back. And who picked out that slinky top? Who knew what sexy was? I did. I dressed you for that interview and you got it. You are a PT because of me. Well, it's just a dash, darling. But you know what they say. Women who wear cashmere don't need anyone. This final poem I'm going to read was inspired by watching some episodes of Poldark. Well, I didn't watch some episodes, I actually watched the whole series, which I never thought I'd do, but I did. And I felt inspired enough to write about it, especially about the infamous rape scene, which I don't want to go into because the poem that resulted from watching it became more about the woman and the women's experience, which at least in this context gives them back some agency, I hope. So this is my observations on that show and a certain time, I suppose. Oh, the patient ladies, the ladies playing patience, the shuffling and the pacing, windows draped with windows, with women waiting. Oh, the patient ladies, the playing of patience, that breathless weather when nothing stirs, no post delivered nor stamp of horse. Oh, the patient ladies, the ladies playing, dull needle, suspense of thread, proposals from unwanted men. Oh, the patient ladies, the ladies playing ladies, heaviness of bed, doctors with powders for panting breasts. Oh, the ladies playing patience. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tiffany. It's wonderful to hear fabulous like sets and I think I can hear another supportive. So you know, it's just lovely. I think like there's just so much you know, like very subtly and deftly done, like, you know, like the way that you articulate all those people's relationships and also how they kind of like the interior self and as you mentioned, race, like class and you know, like all these social sense of social justice. I think it's very cleverly done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to save the questions to later. And thank you also because I know today you're not feeling very well and still brilliant. So shall we now invite Dino, Dino or Konstandinos Mahoney. So he is a London poet of Greek, English, Irish heritage. And Dino won publication of his collection Tutti Frutti in a Sentinel publication poetry book competition and is a winner of the Poetry Society's stanza competition for a very gorgeous poem, which I hope he's going to read. Recent poems have also appeared in Perverse, Butchered Stock, High Window, London Grip, Live Canon, Tentacular, and New European. He teaches creative writing at Hong Kong University and is the rep for Barnes and Chiswick Stanza. He's also part of the Dino and the Diamonds, the group that performs his poems as songs. So let's welcome Dino. Thank you.
Also, Keritis Moussatinelava, greetings from Greece, where I am. And greetings to all my Greek friends who are, I can see some of you are here. The first poem is set in Greece. It's called Table for Two. Supper on the beach with the sun. He sits opposite, facing me. Dazzled, I dare not speak, nor look him in the eye. The waiter brings Greek salad, crusty bread, silver blue sardines. I hesitate. Who am I to dine with a god? I raise a glass of local wine. He reddens, sinks lower in his chair, slips slowly out of sight. Behind me, voices, clatter of cutlery, splashes of laughter, music. I sit alone at a table for two before a darkening sea. Thank you. And my next poem, so one of the themes of this evening is stories, and so this is called Propylamion, and which is a poem which is a celebration of wedding, and so this is a kind of a wedding poem. And just one little tip, that the final part is the beginning, so it's one of those poems that starts and then ends before it starts. Propylamion. A week before their wedding day, she sweeps into the living room. Here comes the bride, all dressed in white, does a model's twirl. What do you think? He looks up from his marking. Between badly drawn curtains, sunlight falls on naked bodies. Thick with the sweat of Sunday sex, he's dozing. She's thinking of confetti, forbidden, but no mention of rice, a loophole she hopes to exploit, and bells, bells. She pokes him, asks him, he grunts assent. She hurries off to let them know. He grabs his toothbrush, takes the lift. Outside an empty road, heat shimmering off the tarmac. A yellow taxi manifests. Bells booked, she returns to dented pillows, wrinkled sheets. She sits on a high stool in Lucky Luke's, drinking rum and coke in her silver blue fur, gift from a lover working in Saudi. The barman turns up the AC, turns up the songs. In walks the English teacher from the night school across the way, mop-haired, skinny, fey. She likes what she sees, had enough of real men. He's drawn to her bovine lashes, brown eyes, auburn hair cascading over Monroe mink. Maybe she's a man. Later, when he finds she's sitting on the real thing, he's too drunk to care. And so it begins. And the next poem is written, I was living in Hong Kong, and then I got a phone call from a couple of lesbian friends in America, and they asked me to be the sperm donor for the child that they hoped to have. And this is a poem about the whole process of doing that. And it's called The Great Comet of 1996 Foretells. Hong Kong, 3 a.m., raucous jangling of bells. He stumbles out of bed, fumbles with receiver. A distant voice proclaims, "You are the chosen one." Kowloon Fertility Clinic. He fills in a form, clay tablet, receives a sample container, silver chalice, is directed down a corridor, valley, to a WC, natural spring, Under a neighbouring stall, lowered trousers over size 12 trainers, east of the field. Sperm count, motility, morphology normal. He buys a ticket, soars across an infinite ocean of peace, transits at Los Angeles, question on form, reason for entry. Through the airport intercom, a heraldic fanfare of trumpets. Boston Logan, group embrace at arrivals with mothers, Trinity. They are one, consubstantial. At home, the couple, straight acting, role play the coming interview, say who they are, fabrication, who they wish and why they wish to have a child, revelation. Cambridge Fertility Clinic, side by side, the couple, straight acting, are interviewed, judged, approved, find favour. He fills in a form, clay tablet, is handed a container, silver chalice, follows a nurse, spirit guide to a private room, tabernacle. Not twice when you're done. Straight porn on the coffee table, penthouse Playboy, Debbie does Dallas, revealed texts. He closes his eyes, visions, not twice. Ritual, hatch doors slide open. Barbecue, burnt offering with the mothers, Trinity. They raise glasses, communion, to the great comet Hyakutake, holy star, smooth oval head, tadpole tail, streaking bright over Plum Island. Thank you. And this is showing different kinds of fathers. Pram dad. Every day he wheels her round the park, past flower beds, swings, along by the river to the Pavilion Cafe, where on hot summer days he buys her ice cream. Good as gold, she never cries, makes a fuss, needs changing. Past nudges, whispers, funny looks he goes, ignores the footballs booted at his rusty pram, sustained by the love in his daughter's painted eyes. Thank you. The next one is a portrait of the artist as a young man, a boy actually. So it's a way of giving a biography through showing somebody around a house. And it's called Celebrity House Tour. This is the kitchen. That's him reading a library book. That's his budgie sitting on his shoulder, nibbling his ear. This is the master bedroom. That is his mum and dad making love on a Sunday morning. That's him sneaking in on them. This is his bedroom. That's him hiding under the covers. This is the bathroom. That's him experimenting. That is his first ejaculation. That's him looking surprised. That's him clearing up the mess. This is the living room. That's him reading his library book. That's the cat sitting on the TV waiting to be fed. That's the cat pissing on the TV. That's the TV exploding. This is the pet room. That is a jam jar with a stick insect in it. This is a matchbox with a ladybird in it. That is a tank with guppies in it. That is a mummy guppy eating her babies. This is the roof. That's him looking at the moon through a rolled up comic. This is the staircase. That's him at the top of the stairs. That is his grandmother's ghost. That is his grandmother's ghost pushing him down the stairs. That is him trying to catch his breath. That is his father thumping him on the back. That is his mother saying, "I told you we shouldn't have brought her home." This is the downstairs parlour. That is his grandmother lying in her coffin. This is the backyard. That's him going into the shed to experiment. This is the end of the tour. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, you want to know what that is? That is his grandmother's backside. She is bending over to pull up some mint for the boiled potatoes. Thank you. And my final poem is Hankow Road. It's called Hankow Road. I used to live in Hong Kong, and I lived in a street called Hankow Road, and I loved it. And it's a poem I wrote about it. And it's got an epigraph. It's from Shuangzi. It's "I dreamt I was a butterfly." And it's the last poem. Hankow Road, a narrow valley bounded by concrete towers so high and massy they get lost in the chemical fog of the befuddled night sky. It is midnight, and the first tortured cries from the big echo karaoke have started to leak through the double glazing. There's the tout coaxing men into Red Lips Bar, a blind street sleeper in the entrance to the shuttered betting shop, waiters in Jade Palace laying out late night snacks, stinky tofu, long prickly goose tongues. And from the speaker above the entrance to Fair Lady nightclub, "It's raining men, hallelujah." The pavements are lined with saplings. They arrived one day last week in open trucks, unloaded, planted, abandoned. The lady in the 7-Eleven said they'd been put there for the tourists, but the tourists walked by unimpressed. This is no street for trees. I have seen trees in much grander neighborhoods peeling from radiation. I worry about their future. Who will take care of them? Their early years choked by diesel fumes, soot from spirit money burned in bins by superstitious mama sons. I fret about their branches getting snapped by supermarket trucks, and I'm anxious about their tender roots being strangled by cables. What will it be like to leave? What if the suitcase won't shut? What if I get lost in the smoke from the Mama San's braziers? Will anyone notice I've left? Will the goose tongue start quacking and honking? Will the blind street sleeper who only sees the dead see me for the first time? Where will I go? Where does the endless line of ants in my kitchen go? A water chestnut moon floats in a beef broth sky. Am I dreaming this road, or is this road dreaming me? Thank you very much. Very star. Thank you. That's thank you in Greek.
That's lovely, Dino. Thank you so much. You can see on the chat loads of like wonderful comments coming up, and it's really like some of the poems especially bring back places that Hankow Road, I mean, just so familiar, and yet you kind of reinvented it altogether. And I really enjoyed also all these like people in your poems and how like this sort of humor in your verse. Wonderful, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
so maybe next we will have Sue. Sue has been, I met Sue so many times in different poetry events, and so Sue Wallace-Haddad, she lives in Suffolk. After a very glamorous international career with the British Council, so Sue has an MA in writing poetry from Newcastle University, and Poetry School London. She writes poetry reviews and is secretary for Suffolk Poetry Society. And Sue has read at different venues, including the Alderbrough 2020. And her short collection, A City Waking Up, is published by Dempsey and Windle last year. She was shortlisted for the Plough Prize in 2021, and her poems have appeared in London Grip, Bristol Star, Fenton Poetry Journal, Ink, Sweat and Tears, Poetry Space, Artemis, and other anthologies and magazines. So now let's welcome Sue to read to us. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much, Jenny, and thank you for the invitation. And it's great to be reading with Tiffany, Dino, and Matt. I'm really enjoying your poetry. I thought I would read a few ekphrastic poems first because I really enjoy writing ekphrastically, and each of them tell a story in one way or another. And after that, I will turn to my collection from Sudan and read from that. So the first poem is after the famous sculpture by Rodin, The Kiss. A virgin in Paris, she met the lovers for the first time that afternoon in the Musée de l'Orangerie. Stone cold white, curved marble, approximation of flesh, two heads fused into one. The frisson of their embrace astounded her 16-year-old self. She viewed the couple from every direction, noting the book set aside, the muscled torso, the sweep of skin. She could not imagine being so impassioned, clothes shed, and wondered at the intimacy of their gesture. 50 years later, she saw the lovers again, still beguiling, just the same. She sat down to catch her breath. And the next poem is a found poem, and it's made up of painting titles by Tracy Emin from her exhibition, A Fortnight of Tears. And she's writing about the death of her mother, which coincided with when my mother passed away. The Memory of Tears. I am the last person. I carried you. I carried your ashes home, the ashes. I prayed in a fortnight of tears. Can you hear me? There was a time when I thought only of you, and there was love. Every part of me kept loving you. When I slept, I longed for you. I could feel you keep watching over me. In the dead of night, I wanted you. I wanted to go with you to another world. I tried not to cry. I sent kisses that come back to me. I watched you disappear, pink ghost, apparition. We said goodbye, but I could see you in my mind. You were still there, angel in an endless dream. How did it feel to be left ice cold? There was darkness, another hell. I was far too young to be carrying your ashes. It was all too much. I cried as I held you. I'm sorry I'm being a bit somber here. The next one also is a bit somber. Sunday morning after Edward Hopper. Head in his hands, the man sits alone on the sidewalk. He hears the rumble of the EL in a nearby street, but his own deathly quiet. He replays the image fixed in slow motion when bicycle met boy all those years ago. The terrible sound of head hitting road, the stain of red. The rusted frame still haunts the alleyway. He has no hand to hold. And the next poem is After Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock, the film. White. And it has an epigraph by Vanetta Chapman. She knew that white was more than a colour. It was an odd, pale shade of understanding, that seems to take all of your hope away. The woman grasps her gloves, white, limp like bloodless hands. She negotiates the hospital glare to find the doctor all-knowing in his Purcell-clean shirt, coat. Nurses ghost the walls, also clinically bright. Picking at a pale cotton thread, she listens to his medical view. Her friend is ill, his mind blank. The colour of nightmares must be cancelled out. Where better than in a sea of white? She steps into the empty corridor. The window frame stares back. And the last ekphrastic one relates to some music by the jazz group Pansuturi, and it has an environmental theme. Where has the water gone? The trumpet whispers the sigh of the sea. Waves try to breathe in gentle rhythm to and fro, suffocate in each surge of floating debris. A curl of water attempts but fails to escape the kaleidoscopic quilt smothering the shore. Seabirds lie dying, their stomachs full of bottle tops, junk ingested from the sea. A drumbeat knells a world without birds. So now I'll turn to my Sudan poems, and this is my cover, the photo I took in Sudan of the River Nile. And I wrote most of these in 2016, but some in 2019 when there were political protests in Khartoum, which I was watching from the UK. I'm married to a Sudanese academic, and I've been visiting the country for over 45 years. So you'll hear stories of family life, but also of protest. And the first poem links to the last poem I just read, as it's about pollution of the River Nile. Jebel Aulia Dam. Ageless, a fisherman throws his nets time and time again, his stance as sure as the rivets of this 80-year-old dam. Barnacled shells lie piled on the quay, human detritus floating below, plastic bottles, sandals, polystyrene packing, caught up in the current as the wind whips up the Nile into muddy waves. This debris will surface in archaeological digs long after the dam gives way. This next poem is about the early morning in Khartoum, and it gave me the title for the book. And it's followed by a poem about the university. A city waking up. Streets deserted, early light hides the heat of day. Pastel green houses dot the khaki landscape, scattered like fresh mint. The roads still puddled with stormwater from the previous night. Queues of children wait for rickety Amjad to take them to school. In daily ritual, herdsmen gather for black tea in checkered shade, their scrawny sheep destined to be killed for celebratory events. By the roadside, sacks of onions, charcoal, lean unsteadily, overfull. Flat bread, pyramids of cucumber, tomatoes ready to be sold. Soon the sun overwhelms this fragile cool. The city stirs and minarets call to prayer. The University of Khartoum. Early before the sun strikes, the building is still locked. Knowledge might fly off the shelves. Desks slumber. Monkeys prowl the cloisters, guardians on the job. They balance with the long, thin tails, chattering, climbing. The hum of air conditioners, whirring fan, background to empty chairs, awaiting the arrival of the prof. He knows the future is not secure, a daily battle in which staff and students struggle to survive. A throng soon gathers, waiting for classes to begin. Salam, the greeting given with open hands and heart. Now, weddings are a major social event, although very curtailed during COVID at the moment. People talk about weddings for weeks afterwards, and you have to sit through hours of video rewatching weddings. So it's very much a storytelling thing, a wedding. And decorating hands and feet with henna patterns is part of getting ready for women. The henna party. The henana prepares the dye, highly toxic, in small cones of paper. She might be icing a cake. She takes us one by one, deftly draws, traces swirling black flowers, loops, circles, flowing lines. Our hands are garlanded, feet festooned with embroidery to complement our clothes. Like linen on a line, our limbs hang waiting to dry. We watch the surface peel, leaving the pattern below. Washing our hands, not once, but twice, thrice, we emerge like butterflies, blinded by the light. And this is the wedding itself, which is the wedding of one of my nieces. And there's one Arabic word, dukan, which describes a smoky dukan is about a bride being steamed in a kind of tent that goes around her neck so that her skin absorbs special scents like oud perfume and sandalwood. And at the beginning, I mentioned ululating. So that is a sound that the women make, which I can't do properly, but is kind of like that. So you have to imagine that, the smells and the sound. White Wedding Night cartoon. Ululating voices of women shiver, rising and falling in welcome, their every silhouette clothed in gleaming folds, diamante sparkles, bright whirls of silver and gold. The wedding hall is decorated in white with frosted trees, garlands of snowy flowers, a fairy tale scene, complete with the couple's glittering throne. The bride smiles, a shy girl emerging from her chrysalis into full sun, her skin softened and scented by performing smoky dukan, henna patterned on her limbs. Oud and zither music fill the air. The singer works the room, calling out family names. The groom, lifted high, is borne on the shoulders of his peers. A camera crew draws close, filming guests, their snapping fingers, exhausted children fast asleep, a night to remember before the next party begins. And the next two short poems are about children in the family. True stories. Encounter. It's hard to call it a proper zoo. Dusty and drab, the animals worn out like old shoe leather, their coats flea-bitten, eyes glazed. One little fellow attracts attention, leaping around in his cage, grasping the slim bars. Children flock round like birds to seed, chatter and cheer. They stretch out their hands. A loud wail, a glisten of red. My daughter learns how trust can be misplaced. Plastic bottle tops. Empty water bottles lie around, their plastic caps scattered like blue pebbles on the striped rug. The two children gather them up. They devise a game to play with simple shapes and colour. The baby places the bottle tops in handbags, on laps, in hands, wherever she feels they're welcome. She posts them into a cardboard box one by one. How lovely the sound, the clunk as they fall. Her 10-year-old cousin helps by sorting, recovering, suggesting. We admire their patient toil. And now in complete contrast, here are 3 poems about the protests. Wake Up Call. Khartoum, 26 January 2019. Practically headless, throat slashed like a sacrificial lamb, he lolls, doll-like, blood gushing out. Arms stretch out to help, drag him away. Not in time. He dies, wasted, but not totally in vain, as I and others on mobile phones 3,000 miles away see the horror, the pain. And it's clear as we absorb the scene, the punishment did not fit the crime. A plea for bread, a stable life. And this poem is about my husband who was arrested. A lot of academics went out in protest on the street. On the outside, 23rd February 2019. I look at you sitting there, smiling, at ease in white jalabia, no sign of stress, as you tell the family of arrest, being locked up in Al Khobar prison. 5 of you sharing a cell with basic conditions, a hole in the ground. For once you had no phone. You enjoyed the quiet, while the family, in a flurry of worry, scouted desperately for news. We imagined the worst, a beating, even torture, the slow drip of humiliation carving into your skin like water eroding a rock. Then suddenly here you are free, looking surprisingly good. You just slept for 2 days, you say, a relaxing sort of hell. And I'll end on this one, which is just a short one. And it's really about patience, waiting and hope, which the Sudanese do a lot of. Donkeys and dust. 2 boys race each other, whipping their donkeys in the dust-filled plain. Earth meets sky. A metal bench waits under a solitary tree, hopeful someone will come. Thank you. And if you'd like my book, please contact Dempsey and Windle or me through my WordPress account, Sue Wallace-Haddad, wordpress.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sue. Wonderful reading, and kind of throws like the dialogue of these poems as well, kind of put together a trajectory that's really interesting. And I'm sure that we have lots of questions later on. And I've also put the link of everyone's books where I could in the chat. So please do support the writers, buy a copy if you haven't done so. Next we have Matt Bryden. Matt is a poet and teacher living in Somerset, and where he runs the Somerset Young Poets competition as well. His pamphlet, Night Porter, won the 2010 Templar Prize, while his first collection, Boxing the Compass, was nominated for the Crashaw Prize. He has also won the Charroux Memoir Prize in 2019 and the William Soutar Prize in the same year. And his project, Lost and Found, which views the lost property office at Bristol Temple Meads as an entrance to the Greek Underworld, won the Literature Matters Award from Royal Society of Literature. So he has published in journals including Poetry Island, Stan, Modern Poetry in Translation, and has read in festivals like Latitude, Dylan Thomas Center, and the John Hewitt Festival in Armagh. He has also created a free interactive online poetry map, some of you might know that, featuring his poems and to prepare for students for Unseen Poem question for GCSE. And he has an MA in creative writing from Goldsmiths. So let's welcome Matt to share his poems with us.
Thank you, Jenny. That's really kind. And thank you to Tiffany, Sue, and Dino as well. I've loved this evening listening to these poems. Thank you, Jenny, for the subject. Actually, I've really enjoyed thinking about stories, and everyone loves stories, especially as you get on in years. So I thought I'd read four very different poems from very different sequences. And I thought, following Sue, I'd start with a poem set in South Sudan. I don't know the country like Sue, you clearly do, but I spent a month there a few years ago working in a girls' school in Iba in Western Equatoria State. It's a school that is trying to teach, to raise female leaders to actually kind of wrest the country from civil war. It was very dangerous. When I went out there, I was advised not to go there, and when I agreed, it was before my wife conceived. So the day I flew out to South Sudan was the same day that I heard the heartbeat of my daughter in the ultrasound, that choo, 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 choo. So it was a really quite intense time. And the reason this poem links to stories is because I saw a vicar there, and he was telling the children that a child without education is like salt without flavor, which is a biblical reference. But then what he said was not biblical. He said, and what happens to salt without flavor? You throw it on the fire. This kind of hellfire, brimstone stuff. And it's also linked to stories because I taught a lesson to these children, and I got them to write letters to my partner and to my dog apologizing for keeping me away from them. So explaining why I couldn't walk the dog and why I couldn't be with my partner. And it was hysterical because all the letters were just saying, "Dear Camilla, I think you should get married to Matt because you're living in sin," pretty much. So anyway, this is called Departures. I heard one girl burst into tears when she saw the showers. And after she learned the class was full, another slept overnight in the hallway, her father having trekked with her 3 days across the land. In the village, they saw staff from the school astride bikes, precarious at first before they became fluent, would walk 14 kilometers to Meridi to man a 1 mango market stall. Now, departures are painful. Billets doux are passed between hands. The girls embody salt they carry back to their villages, often returning marked or muddied at the commencement of each term. They take their leave in formal English. If you want to open this letter, open it with peace. I greet you in the name of our Lord Jesus. Esther Joseph Acquia sends her greetings. And this next poem is based on a film you might have seen. It's called Vajda. It's the first film by a female director from Saudi Arabia. She had to kind of direct using walkie-talkies to control and command the male crew because she couldn't be seen in public with men. And it's based on 3 lines from the film. It's also got a quote from John Cocteau, which is the bit where it goes a bit weird. Maxims, after Vajda, written and directed by Haifa Al-Mansour. A woman's voice is her nakedness. It's true. In the computer room past 12, your sigh, your yawn, it's like we curl up together, complicit and intent, then exit separately through turnstiles. Respectable girls go out of the sight of men. And it's true, the fascination of the separate, Rastafarians keeping a 3-day fire, women in their incarnadine tent, cats that keep to the harbour side, 1 ear, 1 eye, a tattered cast fetched upon a pebble shore. Pythagoras' triangle is a theorem of God. And it's true, you cannot race me on my own vehicle. You, just a mixture of forests and swamps and red rivers, populated by enormous beasts which eat each other, could have no better lover than the neighbour's son, drawn by your headstrong challenge to every rule. Okay, and here's a new poem. I wrote this just speaking into a phone, which is why it's quite rambling. It's based on a visit I made to a kind of a Gerald Ratner kind of figure who had his own jewellery empire. And I've never been so cold in my life in this huge house in this sort of valley. I was just freezing as we ate our food. And he brought out this bottle of carrot champagne that looked like it had come from the Titanic. It was covered in dust and it was just stunning. And I persuaded him, or tried to get another one, but it wasn't forthcoming. But I slept the night there and I took sick for a week. I was so cold. I've never been so cold in my life. And there had been a tragedy. So when this man was 10, he might have pushed his sister off a wall and she died. And his mother blamed him and she became an alcoholic. And I connected the 2 things, the coldness and what had happened. So this is called the Glassblowers House. In the Glassblowers House, where the 10-year-old pushed a little girl who fell from the wall and died, the mother became an alcoholic. And now he drinks carrot champagne with his wife in the freezing kitchen, cold coming in from the garden, an arbor completely contained. His father made jewellery and sold glass bricks to drop into swimming pools and measure how the water rose. Only children with their acuity of sight would be hired to demonstrate the principle of displaced density, the ties binding sports, maths, and physics. My lurcher off its lead burst a hedgerow, and down the steep banks managed to tie herself in wire, the evening quiet but for her panting, as she lay on her side. And I glimpsed inside the globe, the pristine pond, the rising steps leading to the Glassblowers House, where there were still shields from the science department mounted on wood, frozen photographs of extended family, and there amidst them, the girl before the gravel was removed from the drive and replaced with a more dependable surface. And the wife is an immaculate cook. Smell her shaved parmesan. View them sat on high stools before drums of illy espresso, the lawn after dark, after the champagne, a stretch of beach visited by curlews, rocks that remind you of the highlands. And in the innermost room in consummation, 3 children are produced under the pressure of diamonds. They tear through the rooms as if through a museum, no attention paid to the glass cabinets, the high vases. I recall a grandmother watching television as children took sweets from the shelf above her head, then ran behind the door to eat them. Soon were jumping over her, stepping between her thighs, and she didn't move at all, didn't react, say anything as they plundered the cubes of fudge. After several hours, when they heard their own mother in the hall ask, how were they? The 3 children were quite taken aback as she spat out, they were dreadful, just dreadful, and burst into tears. But that memory is behind a curtain. The Glassblowers House has gardens with canes, celery, cress, larders with yellow curd in jars, sacks of flour and nuts, tinfoil pierced by beaks. And those who visit might see children with glinting wings waving wands, with one stroke of which they might disappear and teleport to another room in the house, like itinerant sheep in the facing fields. As croquet hoops sink through soil and running shoes punctuate the sod, we are all nurses in the purlieu of the Glassblowers House. Thin smoke, almost horizontal from the chimney, a granary of gems, the lawn pressed between leaves. As frozen sheets make to billow and pondweed rots, no stone may shatter the glazing, nor release the tongue from its gate latch entrance, its simple key. Cool, okay, last poem. This is from the Lost and Found project, which in a nutshell looks at Bristol Temple Meads Lost Property Office as if it's an entrance to the Greek underworld. And the reason I chose this particular poem is because of the link to stories again. So I'm an EFL teacher, English as a foreign language. And before COVID, I used to kind of run summer schools for 6 weeks at a time. And on the last day, the foreign students would give presentations about their own lives really for 5 minutes. And every time without fail, we always wished we'd done this sooner because it was such an introduction to who they were. And we felt we got to know them, and then they were just off. So I remember an Iraqi boy who was 15, who was describing how his family put all their possessions into a car and were trying to escape the country. And then they came to a checkpoint before they got to the airport, and they had all their jewelry, hundreds of thousands of pounds of jewelry wrapped in blankets that the boy was sitting on. But the one I really remember is this girl, again, 15, from the far eastern point of Russia. She told the story of how she climbed up, she was walking in the woods and she climbed up this tower, like a water tower, and the rungs were breaking. And she got to the top, she had to keep going up, and she just viewed across the ocean and she saw a whale breach. And the snow was settling on her hands, and she thought, I'm gonna die. Nobody knows where I am. And then she saw this pine marten, and somehow, she didn't explain how, she followed the pine marten down and it saved her life. It got her to safety. And the beauty of the story is I said, so this is your spirit animal. This is like you know, here's dark materials, this is your animal, the pine marten. And she said, yes, it is. But she couldn't be sure that pine marten was the translated word from Russian into English. So we never ascertained what the animal was. So this is called the mistaken escort. And the mistaken escort is a trope from ancient Greek literature, where a god comes to fetch somebody to take them to the underworld. And then realizes there's been a mistake, there's a cock up, and has to bring them back and get someone who's always richer by the same name 3 streets down, and then takes them. But the poor person has seen the mechanics and the mechanisms of the underworld by then. So with that preamble, this is called The Mistaken Escort. And it's the last poem I'll read. To her way of telling it, she started climbing the water tower, snow spotting her hands as the rungs snapped underfoot. Pressing on, she pulled herself up into a kind of circular hide whose gunmetal walls held a letterbox window, through which she spied a distant whale breach, before a pine marten threaded a hole in the viewing platform and led her back down. Only later, soul animal set for good, was she roused from bed and escorted to Hades to be reunited with her aunts and uncles. And I asked, are leading guide dogs allowed here, or can the blind see? Before learning she shouldn't have been there at all, but a wealthy woman 3 blocks over by the same name, a clerical error. On her return, she is able to list the order her neighbors give birth, detail the several boys lost in the fire, the fate of the Palestra. Some will say her body went nowhere. They would have seen her as she left her home. She is not sleepy. Her pregnancy will be as calm as the palest blue. Her memory of this like a separate room, a sheer red sash pulled across the pane. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's wonderful to hear your work, and you know, also thank you for giving us all that, like, you know, introduction to all these fascinating narratives. And so now, again, big thanks to all of you who have read just now, and you know, really kind of encourage anyone who would like to make some comments or questions about, you know, if you have questions about their poems, you know, or reflections on the poems, do drop your question on the chat, or if you wanted to, you know, unmute and ask the questions, that's fine as well. So it's really brilliant, because I think, like, from all these poems of yours, they are so different. All your voices and styles are so different, and yet at the same time kind of bring us to many different places that we've never been, and kind of make me see life in a very different perspective. And let me see if there's any question. If not, I'm going to start now. I'm going to start asking. I mean, one thing is, like, I wonder if all of you, anyone wanted to respond to the idea of all of you are very deftly handled form and sound when you talk about, when you have a narrative. Like, so do you come up with the story first and then try to kind of, you know, like, explore how to structure that? How does it work? Or would it be like, did you start with an ending, like you kind of have this image of a person, or how a story probably, you know, the message, whatever? Or do you, you know, how does it begin? I mean, all these, like, very kind of subtle stories about people and emotions. I guess it's a complex affair, but it will be lovely to hear.
I could kick off. I mean,
yeah, sure, Dino.
Yeah, I think it's that if you're writing a story, it's about your life or people you've known or something that's happened to you, I think there'd be an intensity about that encounter or about that person, and it's from that core of the intensity that the poem will come. So it's not that there's a narrative structure that you then fill in. There's an impulse that then grows into something that you then fashion. And then you have to be careful, of course, that it's not A, B, C, D, because sometimes it comes out all over the place. And that's kind of nice. That's what's great about poetry, because you're not writing a short story or a novel. So you can play around with it, you know, and try to get behind it. And also, I guess, narrative calls for realism, but of course there's unreality behind reality. And again, poetry is great for looking at the surface of reality, but then going behind it. Anyway, to answer your question, I'd say, Jenny, that it comes from an impulse rather than from a narrative structure.
Thank you. Everyone.
Yes, I suppose I sort of set off and see where I'm going, so I don't know necessarily where I'm going to end. But I think one thing that I find is if I'm kind of doing a narrative story, that I can be too factual, and I have to really, you know, stop myself doing that and let people imagine. So I think where the poems work is where I've done that, so that you know, people can imagine it for themselves. But I'm quite a prosaic person sometimes, so I get looped into fact.
I think I relate to what Dino's saying about it shouldn't be A, B, C, D, and that last poem about the Russian girl and then the Hades, they're just bolted on. It's really two poems bolted together, and I'm not quite comfortable with it. But what are you going to do? You know, when you're writing narrative, it has to be kind of followable. So I think for me, usually, again, to go back to what Dino said about having the charge of emotion, it usually begins with a line, and you just follow that line and just try and get out the way. And then the next task is making sure other people can understand what you're on about, really.
I really like the way, Matt, in your poems, you bring together lots of different fragments of things you've observed, and it's fascinating how you bring that all together into one poem. So you create something new from these disparate things. It's really interesting.
Thank you, but doesn't it say something that my introductions are like 20 minutes long? You know, the poem should stand alone to a certain extent, and that's why, like with your Sudanese collection, I imagine, I've always found it really helpful to have a kind of like, almost like a pamphlet length sequence. So you're not explaining the context with every poem. You can just kind of chill and trust that the overall theme will hold.
Yeah.
But Matt, your poem did that, the Glassblowers House. You didn't need to link into that. It was there in the poem. You did that beautifully.
Oh, bless you, thanks. Well, maybe that's just because I was just speaking into it. Like I say, I just wrote that by speaking into a phone as I walked, and I wasn't worried about anything. I wasn't even thinking about it for anyone seeing it. So
it's all there, so you can trust the poem, definitely.
I'm going to do it again, I think, these walks.
And also, like, I think some of the poems that all of you have, like, occasionally they can touch on rather unsettling feelings, or maybe difficult feelings, or uneasy subjects, even like whether it is feminism, sexuality, family relationships, and all that. And also the fact that some of them might be slightly autobiographical to mildly or very autobiographical. How do you do you disguise things, or do you try to, how do you find honesty and authenticity in the midst, kind of, or do you try to channel it into another person's, I don't know, sometimes it can be quite hard.
Oh yeah, you can get in big trouble. I've got into trouble with poems. I've fallen out. My daughter hates me for one of the poems I wrote.
She found out.
Well, I wasn't trying to disguise it, but it was a simple poem. It's called Ring Ring, and it was about how at one period in her life she would just ring me up and ask for money, and I could always tell. The poem was saying that I could tell from the way the phone rang but it was her. It was a hectoring ring, and I knew I was going to pick it up, and I was going to say, "Hi, darling, how are you?" And she was going to say, "Fine, I need some money," you know. So I wrote this, but it's tiny, and oh God, she phoned me up and just gave me such a dressing down and slammed the phone down on me. And so you realize as poets, even if you write a tiny little poem, it can go off like a hand grenade. So I know some people say, you know, they're careful about it. I keep thinking I ought to be careful about it, but I don't like self-censoring, you know. As long as you're not writing a poem that's attacking, I didn't think I was attacking her. I was just writing a poem, you know, because it was in a sequence of poems about my relationship with her. But it is a tricky one, Jenny. You're right to raise it. I'd be interested to see what the other poets say.
I was a little surprised when Tiffany introduced her poem, This Man Comes In, autobiographically, because I'd read that poem before and enjoyed it, and it hadn't been autobiographical in the least, and the we in the last line was very much every man, you know? So it kind of brought a new kind of angle to it. And you can't, you know, these things are fascinating, but you can't unlearn things, you know? So I can't approach that poem the way I have before now.
Interesting.
Yeah, everything's autobiographical though. And I think, you know, if you teach creative writing, you always say that where people are uncomfortable, that's where the energy is, and you encourage them to go there in a safe space. So
yeah, absolutely. And I always have been very honest but very careful in the way that I've written about people's experience that I know of, or experience that has impacted upon me. And I guess you just have to check in and make sure that what you're doing is necessary, and it's stylish, it's, you know, it's elegant in a way in which it handles the material. And even if that person still isn't happy with it, and they know it's about them and maybe no one else does, what are you going to do? You know, it's a fine line between real life and art, and people becoming art. And I always think to myself the thought that this isn't life anymore, this is poetry. So whatever existed now just exists as poetry. So it's not completely disconnected from truth, from reality, but it is its own thing now. So focus on the poetry, the art, and not the context.
Yes, I've probably got several poems I've written which I haven't shared with family as yet. I mean, one day I might do, or if I put together a whole collection based on clips, it'll all come out, you know. But sometimes it can be read. You know, most people reading some things would not know if it was autobiographical, but if people know me, then they might well guess some of it is. So
yeah. And what you were saying, Jenny, you know, earlier on about, I mean, poetry is an arena for taboo subjects, for things that people don't talk about. I mean, where else? I think the stages as well. I think kind of like fringe theatre anyway, not the West End, but I think like fringe theatre and poetry readings, those are arenas for exploring aspects of our humanity, our relationship, our society, that can, you know, you can really let it all hang out, and you can go for it, and then you've got a lot of tools in your kit box. I mean, you can be very explicit. You can write agitprop sort of poetry, or you can write, you know, like I really like what you were saying, Tiffany, about the importance of elegance and style. So when you're going to explore something like that, don't just do it for the sake of doing it, but approach it as an artist and try and give it your best. So what you're writing is art, but you could be exploring all dark sides of society, of human nature, channeled through your own experience. But we're all human. We all share that. So, and I think, you know, it's funny, nobody talks about confessional poetry anymore. I think it's become so much part of poetry. We've got so uninhibited now, so un-Victorian, that we accept that we lay things on the table, and so there's almost no need to call it confessional poetry, you know what I mean? But yeah, to keep the art in it important.
Yeah, I think I started writing poetry because of confessional poetry, and I feel like it's a very kind of important thing, isn't it? Like that sort of human values and human subjectivity. It's really powerful.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I mean, like, I suppose a lot of poets from a certain generation have been inspired by Sylvia Plath, you know, one of the great poets, and yet the subject of so much of her work was her own pain and agony, and what led finally to her suicide. That inspired, I think, whole swathes. She still does, you know, and I think that's great.
But isn't that to do with the fact that a lot of people who read Sylvia Plath are reading at 2 a.m. with insomnia, and they just sort of like recognize a way of seeing the world, you know, and it's recognizing that someone else has gone through what you've gone through, and you know, that's a huge thing. You know, that's like 80% of it. You know, you've got me on board.
Absolutely.
The same eyes.
Yeah.
But confessional poetry has become actually quite old hat almost.
Yes, yeah.
You know, you rejoice when you see stuff that isn't all about the self and your experience, and
that's true.
Yeah, because you can read something that is confessional, not so long as it's about experience and you can engage with that, and then, you know, compare or, you know, really take something from it and learn about someone else's experience and learn about yourself through that, then that's the point, isn't it? To connect, after all.
There's only
connect from poetry and voices.
I also wonder, like, about your literary influences. I mean, all of you, do you, like, I mean, what kind of books or collections do you read, or who are your influences? Kind of, do you admire those who write very differently, or kind of?
Well, I guess one of, you know, just to kick off, Jenny, one of mine is Cavafy, and you know, like, he was writing at the beginning of the 20th century, and he was such a frank gay poet. So you know, he opened the portal for gay poetry, you know, just to be natural, just to write about it and celebrate it, you know. So I think he's been an influence on me, and also his Hellenism. It's because being half Greek, he's given me a way into, you know, a Greece that I love, that isn't just the Greece of the Greek islands and holidays and everything. It's the the Greece of the Hellenistic period of cosmopolitanism and sophistication, of, you know, when the Mediterranean was really like a great big New York sort of a place, a big mix of different cultures and people. So yeah, Cavafy for me. Yeah.
Tiffany?
I read whatever my toddler picks from off the bookshelf and brings me, and I see it as a sign, and she'll hand me a book as if to say, read something. Okay, so I'll just open a book at random and I'll read something. But at the moment, I'm reading this wonderful book that a poet friend of mine gifted me for my birthday recently, Dressing for the Afterlife by Maria Taylor. And a lot of it's my kind of poetry. It's engaging, it's sensual, it's written beautifully. It's not too academic. A lot of poetry is far too serious for my liking and just puts me right off. I want some fun, and I want some sexiness, and this does it for me. So I dog-ear pages of poems that I like, and so far this book is nearly all dog-eared. And I have this amazing book from my friend Kimberly. It's an anthology called Tiger, Tiger Burning Bright, and it's an animal poem anthology. It's actually for children, but I love children's poetry because it doesn't take itself seriously, and it's so colourful and engaging. And I write children's poetry, and obviously now having a child, that's become more important to me. So this is my go-to at the moment, a poem a day, although I've been cheating at that. And it's beautifully illustrated, and it really cheers me up with this beautiful animal poetry. And I feel like I've discovered so many new writers, and there's some great names in here as well, Fanthorpe and D.H. Lawrence, who have had fun with poems, which I wouldn't normally read. So these are my two books at the moment that are really fueling me up.
Lawrence is fabulous, isn't he? Lawrence's animal poems are fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes you can just get so bogged down in the idea of poetry and what's trending at the moment and what's important to read. And I just think, oh, I'm sick of that. I'm going to try and find something different that's inspiring, because, yeah, I just take it too seriously sometimes. Need to lighten up a bit.
Brilliant. I love that attitude. Yes, I think we all need a bit of that, like new inspiration, more originality in thoughts. How about Matt? Would you like to?
Yeah, well, so many things. I like Christopher Logue so much, partly because he's just a difficult man, you know, and I like that. A poet should be a difficult man, I think. Tiffany was talking about things that is it your daughter, Tiffany?
Yeah.
Brings you. I'm a single father, and so I think I would say that pamphlets are about my attention span at the moment. I can't read books. I haven't read a novel in years. I'm just exhausted all the time. So pamphlets are just perfect for me. And just like you say, you know, reading fairy tales to my daughter, and then watching versions on film that are different slightly, that, you know, and the way they don't quite fit, and then having that discussion with my daughter, it almost gives you like a 3D inhabitable world. So I don't know what I'm talking about really, but yeah, I think almost like the oral length of a story is what I'm trying to say, whether that's the narrative arc of a pamphlet or whether it's like a contained myth or fairy tale.
Like a bedtime story reading.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly
great.
that kind of arc.
That idea.
What I can do. Mm.
Yeah, I agree. I know that. I know that feeling of tiredness, and then fitting poetry into your life as well.
Sue?
Yeah, well, just building on that, I've always enjoyed reading short stories, and the poet André Mongeau, he has done in the past some terrific short story collections, so I recommend those. But when I was thinking about this, I've selected 3 books which I've particularly enjoyed recently, and they're all, I like things with a different cultural angle. So I mean, this is one, Abia Amir's Inhale Exile, which has been doing really well and getting very good reports. She's got so many stories about the different characters in Iraq. I think it's just fascinating and so well written. She's very good technically. And Love Without a Story, which came out last year by Arundhati Subramaniam, which is a very lyrical collection about her family, sort of Indian influences. It's a beautiful one. And then the other one, this is an earlier one, Louder Than Hearts by Zaina Hashem Beck. And I just really enjoyed her use of Arabic in this, because it kept making me think I should write some more poems with, you know, triggered by the Arabic words. I hadn't realized how much, you know, I'm sure it's the same with every language, particular words trigger memories very strongly. So that I really enjoyed that one, although it's an older collection.
Thank you so much, Sue. That's brilliant choices. I'm really also a big fan of Zaina's work, and you know, and in your own work, yes, lots of like this evocative nature and the language, like the negotiation of different languages and settings. Yeah, thank you so much. I think like I missed, like there was one question that Rodney asked about what does a poem mean. So maybe we can close tonight with just like having, you know, even if you have one quote or one idea about what a poem means to you, like that would be brilliant. Or if anyone can think of something, something wise for us to remember.
That's a big ask.
Yes.
I'm getting very philosophical.
Well, okay, so what I always say if I'm teaching about poetry is that a poem is something that presents itself in a way to suggest that it will reward rereading and attention that is paid to it.
Brilliant. That's wonderful to know.
Poem, a good poem that means something to me is one that haunts me in a way that I never thought it would, but the line will echo for at least a couple of days without me intending it to. So I have to pay attention. It's like reoccurring dreams. Until you figure out what the meaning is behind, then the dream will leave you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, haunting quality. Yeah.
I don't know if it answers what it means to me, but I suppose it means that it's a bloody good poem. Yeah. And it meant something to me at that time.
I think I would say a glimpse into another world, which might be an inner world or an external world. And sometimes, poems which are more difficult poems, it takes me a lot longer to get that glimpse. But, in some cases, it's well worth persevering. In other poems, it's more straightforward, perhaps, being able to understand where the poem is taking you. But I think that sort of feeds your own soul, these little glimpses you get of other worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think you could answer that question every day slightly differently, but today I'm thinking that it's a poem is something that's halfway between meaning and music. So it's not as upfront as meaning, and it's not as abstract as music, but it's somewhere in that liminal worlds, and on to your left is meaning and to your right is music, and you're walking along a tightrope, and you've got these two worlds on either side of you.
I like that tightrope image.
And that answers your question, Jen, about how we write as well. You're trying to narrate something, but you are on a tightrope between music and meaning, so that's perfect way to sum it up.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a brilliant. All these definitions, I kind of very much agree. And also, I think it kind of makes me think like, oh gosh, that's such a skill to, that I really admire in all your work, to sort of condense people's stories and people's lives and moments that sometimes you can't really articulate fully, but it's there, and the same in the poem. And thank you so much once again for giving us such a brilliant evening of work, and really enjoyable. And I think like you can go back to the chat and you can see all that sort of wonderful comments on your work. And I hope that you continue to, all of you, thank you very much for being here. And also do check out the poems in detail and in their publications, and I hope that you have continued to have a good week and good weekend as well.
And thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Jenny. That was lovely. And lovely to read with you other gorgeous poets. It was just so lovely. And everybody there. I mean, there were people from America and Greece and England all over the place. It was brilliant.
And thank you for tuning in from Greece. I feel like we're international here.
You brought Kavafi into this with us. He's here, I'm sure.
Snuck him in.
Well, so good evening for now, everyone, and hope to catch up with you all in the next readings. And take care meanwhile, and be happy in the summer. Enjoy where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.